There's something almost quietly fascinating about watching tension that never quite explodes, tension that stays polite on the surface, like a conversation where everyone is still using calm voices, still choosing their words carefully, still pretending, at least a little bit, that everything is under control. And yet underneath that surface, there's a steady, growing pressure that never really goes away. And that's the feeling I keep coming back to when I think about All in the Family. Especially in those episodes where no one shouts right away, where no one storms out, where everything stays civil, at least technically, even as the emotional temperature keeps rising. I'm thinking about one of those evenings in the bunker living room where the conflict doesn't arrive like a storm. It arrives like a polite guest, something small, something reasonable, something that doesn't seem like it should cause a problem at all, maybe a discussion about inviting someone over for dinner, someone from a different background, someone Archie isn't entirely comfortable with. But the way it's introduced is gentle, almost casual, like it's not a big deal. And that's what makes it interesting, because nobody comes in ready to fight, nobody is raising their voice, nobody is making dramatic declarations. Instead, the conversation begins with that careful tone people use when they know something might become uncomfortable. But they're hopping it won't. They're hopping it can stay manageable. Archie sits in his chair, of course, and there's something about that posture, that stillness, that already tells you he's listening, but also evaluating, measuring, deciding how he feels before he even responds. And his first reaction isn't loud. It's not explosive, it's restrained, almost polite in its own way, but you can hear the resistance in it. As always, is the one who softens the edges, the one who presents the idea with kindness, with that gentle optimism that maybe everything will be fine, maybe everyone will get along, maybe this doesn't have to turn into anything difficult. And there's something so sincere about the way she approaches it, like she truly believes that goodwill alone can carry the moment. Mike picks up on the conversation, adding his own perspective, but even he starts carefully, not pushing too hard, not trying to provoke, just offering thoughts, offering reasoning, as if this could be a normal, balanced discussion. And Gloria is right there in the middle, sensing everything, feeling everything, trying to keep the tone light, trying to keep things from tipping too far in any direction, because she knows how quickly these conversations can shift, how easily they can lose that polite surface. At first, it almost works. The conversation moves forward in small steps, each person speaking, each person responding. And there's even a kind of calm rhythm to it, like maybe this time it will stay under control. Maybe this time it won't turn into one of those long, exhausting arguments. But then you start to notice the repetition. Not loud, not obvious, just subtle. The same concern expressed in slightly different ways. The same hesitation coming back again. The same discomfort showing up in small comments that don't quite escalate but don't quite disappear either. Archie doesn't say no outright, not at first. Instead, he questions, he hesitates. He frames his resistance in ways that sound reasonable on the surface. But underneath, there's something else, something deeper, something tied to his worldview, to the way he understands people, the way he categorizes the world. And Mike responds, still calmly, still politely, but with a firmness that doesn't go unnoticed, because even though he's not raising his voice, he's not backing down either. He's holding his ground in a way that adds weight to the conversation without breaking its surface tone. That's where the tension starts to sustain itself, not through volume, not through dramatic gestures, but through persistence, through the refusal to let the topic go, through the quiet insistence on returning to the same points again and again. Tries to smooth it out, to redirect, to bring in something lighter, maybe a small joke, maybe a practical detail about dinner, something that could shift the focus away from the underlying discomfort. And for a moment it works, the room softens, the conversation breathes. But then it comes back, gently, almost politely, like no one is trying to restart the argument. And yet the argument restarts itself, because the issue hasn't been resolved, it's just been paused. And that's where the show does something really special, because instead of building toward a loud climax, it builds toward a sustained state, a kind of ongoing tension that sits in the room, that lingers in the pauses between sentences, that shows up in the way people respond just a little more carefully each time. The living room becomes this container for that feeling, because there's no escape, no change of scenery, no distraction. It's just these four people in the same space, navigating the same conversation, trying to keep it polite while also trying to be honest. And that balance is what makes it so compelling, because you can feel the effort it takes to stay polite. You can feel how much is being held back, how much is being filtered, how much is being softened just enough to keep the conversation from breaking. In the context of the early 1970s, this kind of interaction was incredibly bold, because it brought real social tensions into a space that audiences recognized as familiar, as domestic, as safe. And then it showed that those spaces weren't actually free from conflict, that those polite conversations often carried deeper divisions underneath. Archie's worldview drives everything here, not in an explosive way, but in a steady, consistent way. He doesn't suddenly become more extreme. He simply stays exactly who he is, and that consistency creates friction with the other perspectives in the room. Mike challenges those ideas, but he does it through conversation, through reasoning, through persistence rather than aggression, and that creates a different kind of tension, one that builds through repetition rather than escalation. Gloria reacts emotionally, not dramatically, but in small, real ways, in the way her voice shifts, in the way her patience thins just slightly, in the way she tries to hold everything together while also expressing her own frustration. And quietly continues to offer kindness, continues to believe that people can meet in the middle, continues to soften the tone even when the content remains difficult, and her presence changes the temperature of the scene in subtle but important ways. What's fascinating is how the humor emerges from all of this, not as a release, not as a punchline that breaks the tension, but as a reflection of it, a way of highlighting the absurdity of how polite people can remain while still completely disagreeing, while still circling the same unresolved issues. You find yourself smiling at the way Archie phrases something, at the way Mike responds, at the way tries to reframe things. But that smile sits alongside a kind of discomfort, because you can feel that nothing is being resolved, that the tension is still there. And that's really the core of what made the show groundbreaking. It trusted the audience to sit with that discomfort, to recognize it, to engage with it, rather than smoothing it over for the sake of easy entertainment. As the episode moves forward, the politeness starts to strain just a little, not breaking, but stretching. You can hear it in the pauses, in the slightly sharper tones, in the way people interrupt just a fraction more than before. But even then, it doesn't explode, it holds, it sustains. It keeps that surface of civility intact while the emotional undercurrent grows stronger. And that creates a kind of tension that feels almost more intense than a loud argument. Because loud arguments burn out quickly, they release their energy. But this kind of tension lingers, it stays. It settles into the room and becomes part of the atmosphere. By the time the conversation winds down, there's no clear resolution, no moment where everyone agrees, no tidy conclusion. Instead, there's a kind of quiet acceptance that the issue remains, that the disagreement is still there, just beneath the surface. And that's such an honest ending, because it reflects how these conversations often work in real life. How people can maintain politeness, maintain relationships, while still holding fundamentally different views. Personally, I find that kind of storytelling incredibly effective, because it doesn't force a conclusion. It doesn't pretend that everything can be resolved in a single conversation. It just shows you the reality of the situation, the way tension can exist without breaking everything apart. And that's why All in the Family still feels relevant, because those dynamics haven't changed. People still have these polite but tense conversations, still navigate those unspoken boundaries, still carry those unresolved disagreements. There's something almost reflective about the way the episode ends, the way the room returns to a kind of normalcy, even though you know the underlying tension hasn't gone anywhere. It's just been set aside, waiting for another moment, another conversation. And maybe that's what stays with you, not a specific line, not a specific joke, but that feeling of sustained tension, that sense of something unresolved, something still present even in the quiet moments. It invites you to think about your own conversations, your own experiences with that kind of polite tension, the way it builds, the way it lingers, the way it never quite disappears. And in that way, the show becomes more than just a sitcom. It becomes a reflection, a mirror held up to those everyday interactions that don't always have clear endings, that don't always resolve neatly, but still matter, still shape the way people understand each other. So you sit with it for a moment after it ends, that quiet, that lingering feeling, and you realize that nothing has been solved. And yet something has been understood, not through resolution, but through the experience of staying in that tension, of watching it unfold, of recognizing it for what it is.